Oh, thank you. So you're just going to do, I'll take a kind of an introduction and we'll go into it. Okay. I'll do it. I'm going to do an introduction prayer. Right. Okay. That sounds good. Who would have known that Reid's family might be a little hard to get sat down? I got it. He was looking at me strange because he's thinking this wasn't turned on. It is good to see all of you here today. It's not a simple day, is it? We come to a place like this with our hearts kind of a little bit different than most days. And yet we come here, maybe not even willingly or easily, but we come here lovingly. We come here seeing who Reid was and wishing for something to happen in us so we can become more like that. Because he was an amazing fellow, wasn't he? Throughout his life, he did things his own way, wonderfully his own way, and yet drew us into that world and invited us to be more. Many, many lives ago, when I was in college, I was part of the mime troupe at the university, and I was doing a festival, and guy behind me said, "You know, you make a pretty good door, but you don't make a good window." But this mime that we celebrate today made a pretty good window to the life, pretty good windows to the soul, pretty good window into love. And so as we come together today and we try to figure out how to let go and at the same time hold on, we come lovingly. We come willingly to learn and grow from who he was. And we come celebrating. We celebrate life. We celebrate love. We celebrate family. We celebrate today Reid Gilbert and the amazing soul that he was. And we give ourselves to the wonder of that soul. Will you pray with me? God of us all, your love never ends. And yet in this moment, it feels difficult to find it. And so we remember that you are still present. You are still with us. And so we pray for each other in our need. And for all anywhere who mourn with us on this day. For those who doubt, give your light. For those who are weak, give your strength. For those who have sorrow today, give your peace. But most importantly, keep true in us the love with which we hold one another. You have shared with us the life of Reid Gilbert, and for all that Reid has given to us to make us what we are, and for that of him which lives on and grows on in us, we give you thanks. So as we come today to offer him back into your arms, comfort us in our loneliness, strengthen us in our weakness, and give us courage to face the future unafraid. Draw us who remain here in this life closer to one another. Make us faithful to serve one another and give us to know that peace and joy which is eternal life. For this we pray. Amen.
So Reverend Dr. was a Methodist minister, as some of you know, Methodist growing up. And among Protestants, Methodists are known for their singing. So I think we should all sing like Methodists. So in this world, Reid can hear us.
So I want you to notice this table over here. It's full of books. He wrote a number of books. You might have known that. And this one is called "Shall We Gather at the River," and I believe it's his latest one.
No, it's one of his first.
It's one of his first ones. Okay, so just know that those books are there and available for you to look at and take. Oh, and to take. All right. We have a reading of, because it would be sad if we didn't give Reid's voice a chance to be heard. So we have a reading by Beverly of one of Reid's poems.
Good morning. I want to see smiling faces because we're here to celebrate. Come on, let's get those smiles going. We're having a celebration. I'm going to start real quickly with one that I wrote for him before I do his. What a man, a dad, a brother, a friend, a minister, a professor, a writer, a poet, a playwright, an author, a director, I'm almost there, mime, and an actor, and one who was an awesome storyteller. I was so glad to be able to be a part of the life of Barbara and Reid's and the family. They welcomed me well. My family is also from Winston-Salem. That's where the roots were. So we're family, okay? Okay, what a man. Your quick wit that put a smile on our face. Your gentle, caring soul will truly be missed. The moment you took flight from this earth, our lives have not been the same. If only, dear God, we had one last chance to see that beautiful smile on your face. We wake each morning to see the sunrise at dawn, and yes, night still follows after day. But there will always be something missing in our lives. Oh yes, the tides come in and they roll back out, and the sands of time seem to have slipped away. Dear ones, just remember memories, that thoughts of you for sharing, and those precious times that we all shared with you will be forever etched in our minds and in our hearts. But what gives us strength is hope each morning, is that one day we will all be gathering at that river. Oh yes, God has called our brother home. But guess what? One day we will see him. Amen. That's a tribute to the family. And this is from Reid. I love this honor. Death is more. Death is more than just passing over, though it is that and yet more. It's a cessation of shared work and play, as we have enjoyed so oft before, but there will be times in days ahead when those of us left here behind will remember past times of joy, vividly bringing those moments to mind. There will be occasions in the days ahead when great wisdom will be received by the ones on this side of the mysterious door, as spoke to us like when he was alive. And as we lay to rest, the mortal frame, may we be comforted by memories of his life, and now embracing each other. In his name, be comforted in our present joy and of our strife. That is by Reid Gilbert. And I'm going to end it out with smile, though your heart is breaking, smile, even though you're saddened, smile, and the sorrow will roll away. You just smile, let those tears come down. It's okay. Just remember, you just smile. Thank you.
So you might have noticed I've got my phone up in front here because we've got a bunch of people on Zoom that are also joining us from all over the place. And so we welcome all of you. I'm going to tell all of you that are out there in Zoom land to stay on the line as we finish, because I'm going to take all your stories and let you share all those so the family can hear them. All of you may not get to tell your phone stories, but you can tell each other your stories. We're going to have a time of sharing afterwards. And one of the most important things we do at a time like this is we share the slice of Reid that we had, so that all of us get more than what we had before. And what we had is always wonderful, right? But here it grows as we hear each other's voices. And so be prepared to share those stories. Regina is going to be one of the first ones to share. She's going to share through singing.
I had the opportunity to meet Reid at OPP, and I did a reading plays that we ended up doing like 3 times because it was so good. And I embodied the person that he really loved, Sister Willie Mae Tiger. And I would be at rehearsal, and before that, I would go and look at older people. Now, I'm not young, mind you, but I look at older people, how they walked, how they talked, how they moved, because I figured she was a little older. And then I also embodied my grandparents, my grandmother, and how they moved, how they walked. And so then I asked Reid, because he'd give all these, notes after the play or after the rehearsal. And I said, Reid, do I have anything? Or, and he'd say, no, just keep doing what you're doing. And so I said, okay. So then I work a little harder, but I'm so blessed. I am so honored to have known such a great man. And I'm so happy. And the last play that I was in was called Running 1,000 Miles. Oh my God, I forgot her name. The Ellen Craft story. And I got to play the role of the great-great-granddaughter and I was telling the story of this beautiful lady. So I'm going to sing something in a cappella that I sang that day, and then I have prepared a special song for the family. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. That was the song that I started the play. Sitting alone in this cold and empty room, reminded of you. It warms my heart when I think of all the things you used to do. my knight in shining armor, and my closest friend. I'm never alone. Your love protects me and surrounds my heart like a fortress of stone. And I feel your presence, as if you were here, though you went away. I feel you near, my life is better, 'cause you make me see where you are is where I wanna be. Did you turn up just a when in the valley, find myself rolling alone down this river of life. I think the words you shared, the mountains that protect me on either side. The day you left, I didn't think I could go on. It was hard for me. But now your voice lives on inside of me. And now I see. And I feel your presence. As if you were here, though you went away. I feel you near, my life is better, 'cause you make me see where you are is where I want to be. Your love is a treasure deep in my soul. When I am broken, your love makes me whole. Love makes me whole. And I feel your presence as if you were here, though you went away. I feel you near, my life is better, 'cause you make me see where you are is where I want to be. Where you are is where I want to be. Where you are is where I wanna be.
I feel Reid's presence, don't you? Uh, as Regina's singing, I'm looking over at our angel wall, and that's an evolving wall as we put people up there who continue to speak to us and be with us. Some of them still alive, and some of them, like Reid, who have passed on to a much larger room. But they don't go away, do they? They stay here with us. They keep company with us. Their voices help us and sometimes help people in India, right, Barb? And continue to speak and be in life. We have two people who are going to speak about that life, who Reid was and how he lived his life. Craig is going to speak first, followed by Rick. Oh, he's on here. We knew what we were doing once. So Ian, Craig needs to be given permission to come on and speak to us. And if we can. Why don't we do this? Rick, do you want to speak first? And you get that ready and come on up and speak to us.
Although it wasn't what I was planning. Here we go soon. So I just want to say, first of all, to the family, which is really, in a sense, all of us. It's just an incredible honor for me to be able to be here with you to celebrate Reid, but also to celebrate life, right, in itself. And if there's one thing that I learned that Reid loved was life. He just truly loved being here and doing this journey. And it was quite a storied journey for Reid. But life's full of so many stories. Each of us is a story, each one. And the amazing part of each of our stories here are the Reid chapters of our story. And what a magnificent, mysterious moment that we are all here, either embodied in this place or through the light of technology, because each of us is part of Reid's story. Take that in for a moment. Just take that in. Each of us is part of Reid's story. That will never, within all history of humanity, change. We are a part of his story. And his stories is one not just filled with creative and wondrous adventures, but an amazing and voluminous assortment of characters he invests in. Each of us engaged in our own adventures. In my story, I meet Reid almost 40 years ago. In my story, I meet him because he is a friend of Marcel Marceau's. And I am a part of a major international school for fine theater in Ohio. And we are hosting Marcel Marceau, and Reid visits so that he can spend some quality time with a man that he admired. I remember the very first time that in my story, Reid walks up to me and he introduces himself. And though I don't remember what he says exactly, I totally recall the warmth, the grin, the slight smirk that he had, and kind of a sense that he was saying to me, I know what you guys are all about here, and I hope to show you a little bit of what you don't. And over the course of a relationship with Reid in my story, Reid teaches us about sword play, a little bit about Kakakali, mime. He teaches us his love and his passion for the art that is my love and passion too for this art of mime, physical theater. But sooner or later, I left that world in Ohio to weave my own next adventure. And in my story, I lost contact with Reid. I can't even remember exactly how many years later in my story, as I am rehearsing a production in Tucson, Arizona of my company, Reid walks into the rehearsal to find me because he knew I was here in town and he had moved back. So we had a grand reunion. I welcomed him, introduced him to the cast, and we spoke a little bit about theater and spoke to the group. And then we began what has been a really vital part of my story. He and I spent so much time together, and we speak to each other. And we have long conversations that we spend with each other. During the time that I work with Reid on some of his book publications and help him get those published. And in that time, after he's subsequently created 7 more books in the last 7 years, we sit together and we share a lot of stories and wonderings about what it's like to be here, to have this gift of living. And we talk about political, current events. We speak always about our days and our experiences in pastoral ministry, which we both shared from our past histories. We speak about our fascinations with science. We speak of cosmology, neurotransmitters in the brain, how those neurons work. And we speak a great deal of his love for his Appalachian roots. We speak about the commonalities that he experienced in growing up within that culture, and my father's roots, who also came from Appalachia. And we speak about the common things we experienced, but also radically different elements of life too. We speak a lot about his joy that he holds for his student colleagues, his friends, and the absolute love that he has for his family. We spend many times, many hours sitting together while under the guise of getting the work done for his books, speaking about the story of life. In my story, I discovered that Reid's heart is impassioned by connection. He loves all of the characters that grace his story, his life. Above all, we and so many others are his reason for being. And his desire is to share that passion and the thrill of life lived among and in communion with others. In my story, I learned that today we convene as not only part and parcel of Reid's story, but in this moment, we are now and forever engaged in one another's stories. What a marvelous, extraordinary legacy to be a part of. In my story, Reid encourages us to deeply engage in living, to let our stories freely mingle with one another. In my story, Reid encourages us to connect, to that great story of humanity that he so deeply loved. So bless you, and may Reid remain.
Oh, thank you, Pastor Jim. Thank you, Regina. Rick, that was wonderful. I knew I should have created a eulogy in pantomime. Then when my microphone didn't work, I could simply, start presenting that eulogy in nonverbal communication. However, I'm very thankful that the technology was corrected and now I am vocal and sharing with everybody there. Thank you so much to Reid's daughters, Tari and Adrian and Karen, for asking me to present this eulogy. I first met Reid 47 years ago at the Valley Studio in Spring Green, Wisconsin. When I arrived there, I was a young man. I wanted to study theater. I'd been at the University of Minnesota. It wasn't satisfying. I'd heard of this place, Valley Studio, and I'd heard of Reid Gilbert. When I arrived there, I was overtaken with the beauty of the setting, and I was stunned by the person of Reid Gilbert. This is a man who simply somehow mercurially led us through doors into rooms perhaps many of us didn't even know existed. I entered that room 47 years ago. I have never looked back for that door. I continue to roam the world that Reid presented to me way back in 1975. In the spirit of the Valley Studio, we would gather, we would share short stories, we would share sharings, little performances. To that end, as I struggled to write a eulogy, I thought, well, why don't I share some of those stories from my friends and my associates and former Valley Studio apprentices? Thankfully, Reid and the ever wonderful Jeff Landon compiled a book. The title of the book is Valley Studio, More Than a Place. I encourage you to seek it out. Perchance it's there in the chapel. It's filled with heart-warming stories of everybody's remembrance of Reid and the influence that it had on their lives. I've chosen a few of these selections to share with you today. The first selection I'd like to read to you was written by Thomas Ukinski. Tom was my roommate when I arrived at Valley Studio. Tommy was from Chicago. He was a stand-up comedian. And he came to the Valley Studio to learn more abstract elements of performance art. As time went forward, Tom ended up becoming a lawyer, and he presently lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. And it was about 5 years ago that Tom wrote this beautiful poem for Reid Gilbert I would like to share with you now. The Mime. Tensely pliant, the leonine reeds sliver silvered marsh with brush-stroke shadows as he passes, pearled by dawn, flanneled and fatigued, his russet hair like curling grass, his gravid face raged by glimmering, while thick-backed hills mutter sunrise. Grease paint and silken white blur him discarnate. Serpentine in stage light, he limns tenuous beings who shape him with shudderings. Slim, striate arms force strength upon itself. Glyphic immobility symbolizes objects as only the human cannot do and be rhythmless amidst the city. Through interstitial trees, he sees great crowds of women coddling the downy sun, hears scraping and chirrings and whispering wraiths, and absorbs the rhythms for a storytelling dance. I've also extrapolated some little brief gems of reference made to how Reid impacted the lives. And I'd like to share a few of them with you now. from John Townsend. One thing about Reid was that he was so very open to everything. He took to heart Mao Zedong's phrase when he said, "Let 1,000 flowers blossom." Then there's Ronlyn Foreman. Ron studied at the Valley Studio. Ron now has his own theater enterprise. And in recalling Reid's influence on Ron's life, here's what Ron wrote. It was Reid's conviction concerning community that set the tone and the atmosphere of the Valley Studio. He believed that it was an artist's personal responsibility for caring for the place, including regard for and maintenance of the studios, preparing meals, conserving resources, as well as being self-reliant and collegial. Reid emphasized that the artist performer must be a responsive citizen of the world. Studying there meant a commitment to contribute to the community that sustained the place. And from Sandy Zieg, Dr. E. Reid Gilbert is an inspiring mentor and teacher. He taught us everything he knew, including about the lone whippoorwill that would sing every day at dusk. I can't do my whippoorwill whistle anymore. But that whippoorwill, from darkness until dawn, every single night of late spring through September, was the background music. It was the metronome of life at Valley Studio. Sandy continues, he gave us infinite room to grow creatively, both as a group and individually. Reid's guidance, mentoring, and big heart have stayed with me throughout the years. Reid gave us confidence, love, and creative freedom to grow, explore, and expand. I am forever grateful to Reid, a shining light on my path. And then, of course, Thomas Lebhart. I continued to study with Thomas for 3 years after departing from the Valley Studio. And Tom and Miss Sally, his wife, had a very charming and simple recollection of Reid that I think captures a facet of Reid's deep character. Reid had this wonderful country kind of wise, sort of like an old country doctor or old country judge who was there dispensing wisdom. He believed in the whole person, that everybody should do chores. So we all took on the chores. The spirit that Reid brought is exemplified in his wanting to call the little performances sharings. That's a very Reid kind of thing. Reid wrote one book, if not more than one, on a character that Reid developed. I think this goes back to his Appalachian roots. It was Trickster Jack. And to be among Reid, you had to stay on your toes because you weren't always aware of whether or not Reid was being sincere or you were being tricked into doing something that you would later find out was, oh my God, I had no idea I was being set up. But there was always a lesson behind that. And one of the apprentices, summer session students, was Patrick Shirata. Patrick grew up in Brooklyn. I think Patrick's first arrival at the Valley Studio was a newfound experience. He was out in the bucolic, Wisconsin countryside. I remember him telling me, it's so dark out here. It's so quiet out here. This is so strange. And Patrick recalled a specific incident. I recall the incident. I was one of the people with Patrick when this occurred. Here's the story. Another memory I have was walking through the woods with 4 or 5 guys at Reid. Reid wanted to show us how to shuck corn. He told us that the best corn comes right off the stalk, and you husk it, you run, and you throw it into hot water immediately, so that there's like 10 minutes between picking it off the plant and putting it into the water. So we're walking around and we come to a cornfield and Reid says, oh, let's take some. The farmer will never know it. So we take 3 or 4 ears each and we're holding them. And I'm feeling very guilty because I'm not a thief. Yet I've taken some other guy's corn. I'm not feeling good about it, but we're following Reid Gilbert, right? So we get to this house in the middle of nowhere, and Reid says, oh, let's go inside. I want to show you what a country house looks like. But I said, we can't just go into someone's house. To which Reid replies, no, nobody locks their doors here. Don't worry about it. We'll be in and out in a minute. I know this guy. He's not home. I want to show you what it looks like. Then I say, well, back in New York, we call this breaking and entering. And everyone kind of laughs nervously. So we get inside, and I'm still thinking, this isn't right. We're inside looking at somebody's house. So I say, we got to get out of here. I'm from Brooklyn. This is frowned upon in Brooklyn. At this point, Reid says, don't worry, that's my cornfield, and this is my house. Then we put the corn down on the table, and he says he's having a party that night. We had picked the corn for his party, so we didn't commit any crimes. We just helped him out by picking the corn. Yeah, there was always that element of trickster Jack somewhere hidden in Reid Gilbert. It could come out at any time. Rick Waymer referenced the fact that Reid saw life as a celebration. Reid tried to instill in me and everybody that there were no wasted hours. Every moment of every day, no matter how mundane or insignificant, yielded acres of discovery and opportunities to learn. In the book, Valley Studio, More Than a Place, Reid recounted a simple daily walk that he took from Lola Richardson's house over the ridge to the Valley Studio each morning. A common companion of Reid's was the great Smokey. Smokey was a black Labrador Reid had brought with when he came to Wisconsin. And Smokey was cantankerous. He chose his friends selectively, but Smokey was beloved by, well, mostly everybody. I think there's a few out there would say, yeah, that's Smokey, changed my life forever and not for the best. Anyway, Reid recounted this one morning early dawn walk he took from Lola's over to the Valley Studio, and I'd like to share that with you. One beautiful spring morning when Smokey and I were walking over to the studio from the Lola house, I was overwhelmed with the scene when we were crossing the old pasture. I looked down the valley to see the fog-enshrouded Wisconsin River. And right in front of me was an apple tree in full blossom. On a low branch of the tree sat a scarlet tanager, preening his coat. I was unable to go any farther as long as that gorgeous bird was performing there for me. So I figured that if I got closer, he would just fly away. I walked slowly toward him, but he only continued his morning ritual. I finally had to go right up to him and tell him to leave, which he thoughtfully did. If he hadn't left, I would have been there all morning. Quintessential Reid Gilbert. Walking along the path, finds a bird, interprets that bird's preening as a performance for him, and he would have been happy to have sat there all day. These were also the moments that Reid would instill in us as valuable resources for our own creative endeavors. Reid forever painted the world for us in new colors and in new dimensions. When I was with Reid and when I was at the Valley Studio, aside from performance techniques, lessons for how to cook or how to ruin cooking, how to clean floors, paint and build stages, there were other arts represented. I will for always be thankful to another apprentice, Susan Kritzberg, who brought along a copy of a book by Annie Dillard, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. I return to the book constantly. It refreshes my soul. It stretches my perspective. And there is one specific passage. Every time I read it, I think not only of the Valley Studio, but significantly of a great gift that Reid gave me. I'd like to share that with you now. Thomas Merton wrote, there is always a temptation to diddle around in the contemplative life, making itsy bitsy statues. There is always an enormous temptation in all of life to diddle around, making itsy bitsy friends and meals and journeys for itsy bitsy years on end. It is so self-conscious, so apparently moral, simply to step aside from the gaps where the creeks and winds pour down, saying, I never merited this grace, quite rightly, and then to sulk along the rest of your days on the edge of rage. I won't have it. The world is wilder than that in all directions, more dangerous and bitter, more extravagant and bright. We are making hay when we should be making whoopee. We are raising tomatoes when we should be raising Cain or Lazarus. Go up into the gaps. You can find them. They shift and vanish too. Stalk the gaps. Squeak into a gap in the soil. Turn and unlock more than a maple, a universe. This is how you spend this afternoon and tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon. Spend the afternoon. You can't take it with you. Reid made certain that we learned how to find those gaps. And even 47 years later, I wake up and I look for gaps, and I go out each day and I thank Reid Gilbert for giving me the vision to spend all of my days so that when I retire at night, I'm bankrupt. My account will refill in the morning. The last piece I'd like to read has to do with the appreciation that Reid always showed us for every person. It didn't matter if it was a farmer, if it was a merchant, if it was a dancer, if it was a mime, if it was somebody that you simply exchanged pleasantries with at the gas station or the supermarket. Reid saw the importance of the human parade and how every person we contact throughout the arc of our life becomes ours. And again, especially an old friend of Reid's, an architect that had studied with Frank Lloyd Wright, Herbert Fritz. I had the pleasure of knowing Herbert and living on his estate for 9 years. When Herbert passed, I presented this piece at Herbert's memorial service. And when I read this piece, again, it reminds me specifically of the wonderful Reid Gilbert. This is from Ralph Waldo Emerson's thesis on friendship. I awoke this morning with devout thanksgiving for my friends, the old and the new. Shall I not call God the beautiful, who daily showeth himself so to me in his gifts? I chide society, I embrace solitude, and yet I am not so ungrateful as not to see the wise, the lovely, and the noble-minded as from time to time they pass my gate. Who hears me, who understands me, becomes mine, a possession for all time. Nor is nature so poor that she gives me this joy several times, and thus we weave social threads of our own, a new web of relations, and as many thoughts in succession substantiate themselves, we shall by and by stand in a new world of our own creation and no longer strangers and pilgrims in a traditionary globe. My friends have come to me unsought. The great God gave them to me. By oldest right, by the divine affinity of virtue with itself, I find them, or rather not I, but the deity in me, and in them derides and cancels the thick walls of individual character, relation, age, sex, circumstance, at which he usually connives, and now makes many one. High thanks I owe you, excellent lovers, who carry out the world for me to new and noble depths, and enlarge the meaning of all my thoughts. These are new poetry of the first bard. Poetry without stop, hymn, ode, and epic, poetry still flowing, Apollo and the muses chanting still. Will these two separate themselves from me again, or some of them? I know not, but I fear it not, for my relation to them is so pure that we hold by simple affinity and the genius of my life being thus social, the same affinity will exert its energy on whomsoever is as noble as these men and women wherever I may be. Thank you, Reid, and thank you everyone for listening. I love you.
Now let's listen to this music piece.
I am a poor wayfaring stranger, wandering through this world of woe. But there's no sickness, no toil, or danger in that bright land which I. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross. Oh, don't you want to go to the gospel peace, that promised land for all?
As I was looking at Reid's life, I was struck by the names of his books. The contents weren't bad either, but I was struck by the names of the books. The one that's over here, Shall We Gather at the River, the song that we sang today. You know why that song's a question, right? Because you know that when you gather at the river, very often someone gets in a boat and goes upriver or downriver or across the river, and they depart from us. They go farther away. And so it's like, if I go there, I'm going to have to say goodbye. And that's kind of where we find ourselves. But it's interesting that they go far from our eyes, but stay close in our heart, don't they? Those folks we love don't go away. They stay with us, but our relationship changes. I wonder, as I wander out under the stars, under the sky, it says on the program, he wandered. Barb said this about him: you didn't own Reid, you just loved him. And she added, and you received generous love in return. So he wanders into our life, and at this moment back out of our life, or at least back out of where we have him right now. And we have to relearn how to hold on to him as he goes into that next place, because it doesn't feel the same. And we want to grasp and we want to hold on. But one of the things Reid learned very early on in his life was how to let go. One of his books was entitled The 12 Houses of My Childhood, because that's how many houses he lived in growing up, moving practically every year. They were not the richest of families. In fact, he shared a pair of shoes with his sister. And that moving from house to house partially prepared him, but partially opened his heart to what his life would be like. He was fascinated about 12 years old with some gypsies that were passing through, and he went to his mama and said, Mama, well, tell me about them. And said, they'll take you far, far away, which Mama saw as a bit of a fearful space. But I think it opened Reid's heart to go to that far, far away that he hadn't seen yet. And he wandered far from his mountain home. But here's the important thing. Even in his wandering, he didn't disconnect. He stayed close to that home, and that home stayed close in his heart. And those people who lived there and those people he met throughout his life stayed with him, for he knew very well the importance of relationship. That's why we're here today, isn't it? Because he knew well, maybe not all those relationships, but the relationship with me. And he lived this relationship well, and with you and with each one of you. He lived in that relationship well, however long he knew you and however far the rest of life took him. Anita Diamant, in her book, The Red Tint, said, of all life's pleasures, only love owes no debt to death. How he loves us, how he has loved us continues to be how he will love us, and how he will continue to live in and through us because of those relationships. He wrote another book called Embodying the Word, and his life did do that, didn't it? He was described by his family as a very gentle and vulnerable poor man. But he was that, wasn't he? He had such an open heart, such a willing spirit to be seen and to share himself. I don't know which one of you it was, but one of the grandkids said, Papa was a young soul. And it was a young soul that continued to open his heart to what could be, continue to learn and grow. And he was filled with curiosity. What is there to learn right now? And he would sit right over here. while I would sit up here on Sunday mornings and would talk about his next thing he was going to do. The new way he was going to open his heart, the new journey he was going to take, even as he was obviously journeying closer and closer to this journey. He was worried about all the things that he could still learn, be. I loved one of the things the family said, where they talked about him having the temperament of the biblical Abraham, where he had a tent with entrances in 4 directions. His heart, his life, his way of being and living was open and invited us in. The scripture for today is Romans 12. We have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us: prophecy, ministry, teacher, exhorter, giver, leader, compassionate, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers. He did that, inviting each of us to find our gifts and become those gifts. What did Reid teach you? What has changed inside of you because of this man we celebrate today? If you don't become it, Reid's going to come back and haunt you. Because that's what he did, didn't he? He called you into being, into becoming whatever it was that you were supposed to be. In his last book that I'm going to talk about today, it's called Stories Tell What Can't Be Told. He told his stories, who he was, and how as a 12-year-old he had that dream where he thought he might be dead, but then he said, well, but Mama's here, so I can't be in hell. Our lives tell stories, and Reid invited us to be honest and open and willing to share those stories. What's your story that comes out of you? How does Reid's life invite you to become that story even more? One of my favorite songs is a song by Jewel where she sings, "There's a hole in my heart in the shape of you." How many like your Reid-shaped hole? In this moment, it hurts. In this moment, we struggle. In this moment, we don't know how to let it be a hole. But man, we want that space where he lived, because he will continue to be with us and inspire us forever. Something is missing in our heart today, but it will be filled with the wonderful presence of that man who left that hole. And that presence is worth everything, isn't it? We come together in grief, acknowledging the loss that we go through, but we also celebrate. For this man filled us with joy, filled us with love, filled us with hope of what can be. So go from this place not sad. Be joyful, because you lived with a man who lived life wonderfully, maybe even perfectly. Amen. We have one more song to sing together. And so take this life which was given to us in such abundance, and go and tell the story, not just of Reid, but how Reid inspired you to become you. Tell that story and bless the world. Amen. Amen. Don't forget to share with us these things back here. I won't tell you how I know that they're good, but I was back there for a while. I'm going to have the family kind of gather up here, and if you want to come by and give your condolences and your joy to them, please do that. So come on up. Barbara, come on up here. Come on up here and say hi. What? Come up here. All of you that are at home, I'm going to go grab my other device, and I'm going to take your stories. Hello, everyone. It is good to see you. Can you hear me? All right. So what I want you to do is, if you'd like to tell a story, will you just type in the chat that that you'd like to say that, and I will unmute you, or I'll ask you to unmute at least. Who has a story they'd like to tell about Reid?
This is John Aiden.
Yes, go ahead, John. Oops, we lost you. John? Go ahead and unmute again.
Okay. I'm John Aiden. I live in Florham Park, New Jersey. But I first met Reid when I grew up on the West Coast, and for some reason, I wanted to become a mime. Somebody saw a poster. There was a school in Wisconsin. This was, I came out there in January. I met Reid. I stayed for many, many years. I was an apprentice. I was part of his company, and he was just always so wonderful to work with. And one of the things I just enjoyed living at the studio with him, and the way he, encouraged everyone. But I just loved riding with him. Whenever we did a show or went someplace, it was always a joy to ride shotgun with Reid and just hear his stories. He was just such a wonderful man. Eventually I lost touch, but I moved to the East Coast, but we're able to still stay in touch throughout the years. And he was so heartwarming. He just touched everybody. And I just want to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Michael.
Yes. Can everybody hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Good, thank you. I am Reid's first cousin once removed. He was my father's first cousin, and guess who my father was? Jack Gilbert. Reid used to share with me that Trickster Jack was based, the Trickster Jack character was based on my father. I'm so grateful to hear that today. I think what's important for me anyway, I feel like he has left us with a window into our family's history, the Gilberts of Patrick County, Virginia, and Stewart, Virginia. He has left us a window into our past that will continue to be a part of the Gilberts family tapestry. And that is more valuable than I can even put into words. And I had the opportunity to tell him that one last time. So I'm grateful to be here today and grateful for his life and what he gave us and what he has left us. And yes, as you were saying, the relationship has certainly changed, but his legacy will never die in this family. And it's so grateful. I'm so grateful to see how his legacy is so solid amongst so many of you, of the others whose lives that he touched. And I'm grateful for that. Thank you so much. Rest in peace, Reid.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you also to both of you who kept it relatively short. I forgot about my joke about having to cut you off after 45 minutes, because I hope nobody goes that long. I have the other Michael Quay.
My name is Michael Quay. I'm his older sister, Susie. Of course, she was just mom to me. And I share this with Adrian via text. And when my mom was, unlike myself, was very shy, but she was a pretty girl and she dated a lot. And my uncle Reid and his younger brother, they used to threaten when she would go out. They were going to wear coveralls and they say, "Hi, I'm Reid and I'm Ott and we're hillbillies." They just say, "Please don't do that. Please don't do that." And they never did that. But my mom, when she went off to nursing school in Charlotte, North Carolina, she said what she missed the most was her two younger brothers teasing her about that. So it's kind of funny, even though they never did that, they always threatened, since we have the hillbilly blood on our. So I thought that was interesting how she always remembered she missed that so much that her two brothers would, Reid and Ott would threaten to jump out behind the door and go, "Hi, I'm Reid, I'm Ott, we're Susie's brothers, and we're hillbillies." And they never did it, but she missed it so much.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Michael. I appreciate it. I hear we have Evelyn has a story for us. Evelyn?
Yes, I'm Reid's younger sister, and I've told him that I'm bigger than he is now, but I'll always be younger. But I will miss his autumn visit with us this year because he always loved to come and have gin and tonics.
Nice. Thank you so very much. Next person I have is Mary.
Hi. I just want to say that Reid came into my life at a pivotal time, and his influence in his kindness, his generosity, and his love just changed me in such a way that I don't think he ever knew that. But I know that he's looking down on all of us today, and I love that man. Even though I didn't know him for very many years, he is the kindest man I've ever met. Thank you.
Sometimes it doesn't take much, does it, Mary, to be touched deeply?
No, that's for sure. And he touched me deeply. And I met him at a Tucson Festival of Books writers presentation. What better place could there have been?
Nice. Thank you, Mary.
You're
Ursula,
welcome.
you have something to say.
Yes, hello. I met Reid in the fall of 2000. He was a part of my doctoral research, and I feel so honored to have met him. But I want to share that my doctoral research was on creativity, which is how I really met him, through that topic. But secretly, my dissertation is really exploring relationality. And it's so amazing to have met somebody so extraordinarily willing to engage with me, with life. Every question I asked to inquire about, he would tell a story. He would tell a poem when I shared a poem. It was really such an honor to meet a human being so lovely, like everyone has shared, but just so willing to step up and meet and be engaging as another human being. And that was really an extraordinary gift. So I wanted to share that. He will be written into my dissertation confidentially, but I completely honor him as a human being, and I'm so touched to have met him.
Thank you, Ursula. I think most of us can say he's written into our dissertation of life, whether or not we ever write it, right?
Right.
He kind of just invades, if I can say it that way, and lives in precious, wonderful ways inside of us, doesn't he?
He does. Yes, amazing. Even when you only get a few moments to meet him, he's so extraordinary. He just moves in to have this engagement that flowers, like builds a garden instantly. So I really recognize that. And so I'm so touched to hear the stories today because it reflected what I experienced of him.
Absolutely. And to think that this world had so many wonderful, amazing years of this man. Eileen,
Yes.
I see that you would like to speak.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi,
Thank
everybody,
you.
and thank you for extending the invitation for this. Reid, I was part of the Valley Ridge here in West Virginia. I still live here because of Reid. I have expanded my theatrical storytelling and movement theater because of him. But even more so, we made the trip to Tucson to visit him, Thomas and I. And he was reading to us that night, just a couple weeks before he passed, one of his later poems. And it showed me the tenderness that he understood about race relations. I'm one of the few Black folks who have had that intimate of a relationship with him. And he trusted me to look at these things with that eye. And the poem he read was Colored People. But it had such a significant impact in my heart. And I felt that he heard me. He heard me above all of the other stereotypes and images, and created a world where I could be, and I could be equally as gifted and giving to the world as anybody else. And I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much, Eileen. All these stories that you're telling, don't just tell them to us, tell them to your family, tell them to your neighbors, tell them to anybody that'll listen, because this world needs more of the blessing that Reid Gilbert gave to it, doesn't it? Anyone else who would like to share, go ahead and unmute. All right, it looks as though we might be finished here. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing Reid Gilbert with us. Take care, my friends.